Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of The Sun, and my guest today is George Epstein. He's a regular monthly guest. He's a Sun columnist. George, how you doing?
Very good. Beautiful 100-degree day out there, I think.
Yeah, and you're wearing your Madras shirt, I see.
It's summertime.
Does anybody, there's a trivia question for viewers. How many people know what Madras is from, we do, because we're of age.
Ancient people know that. Yeah, it was very cool when we were around in the 60s. And India, right? Madras is the cotton that it was painted onto, and it blurred more. This isn't quite Madras.
So it's not. You said that it doesn't. It's not fading.
It's not fading. It's not bleeding. It was supposed to be a little mushier than this. These are sharp colors.
Yeah, you're looking pretty. You're looking pretty sharp. I will say. I would have worn my Hawaiian shirt, but I didn't know the occasion. All right, we're gonna just spend just a minute about education because we got more interesting stuff to talk about. We did a teletalk. We have a new superintendent nominee. She's in the middle of negotiations right now for salary and all that kind of stuff. And we did a teletalk, which is in today's paper. Today is Tuesday, whatever the date is, June 18th?
18th.
Yep, tomorrow's June, yep. And so, except for the snarky answers, there were some legitimate, hey, you know, let's do a good job and all that. So what recommendations would you have?
Well, I'll join the nice teletalk people who are welcoming her to the Valley, and it sounds like she has a really interesting background. It was great that the search committee, sounds like they came together and really got behind her, and she was an attractive candidate to, I think, all of the members of that committee. So that's really encouraging. I think you come here with a job like this, a big job, covers a big area. There are so many people involved, so many different school boards, sending districts, both those that are in SAU 9 and those that are in SAU 13. So first things first, you kind of have to reach out and go out and visit people and shake hands and get to know who the players are in the various towns and what their thoughts are. But I think in terms of sort of stepping back and setting big goals for herself, I think one of the big questions she has to ask is, why are so many students not choosing public education? Why are so many going to charter schools? So many are homeschooled. So many are traveling for school. What is it about our school system that doesn't appear to be meeting their needs? And really digging into that question. And I think talking to a lot of parents who are not sending their kids to our public schools and asking them why would be an interesting starting point for her. How much of it's test scores, how much of it is the environment in the school, bullying, safety, how much of it is encouraging quirky talents, how much of it is special education services, both pro and con. What's the status of what's happening in the schools today? And not just asking internally, but reaching out to those that have made a decision to go somewhere else. Boy, I think that would be informative. First thing I would do.
All right, I was on the search committee, and all the candidates, you know, and test scores are always controversial, right? I mean, because, you know, I think everybody, even though, I mean, SATs, regardless whether you support them or not or believe in them, they're an indicator, let's face it. And so are test scores. And so all the candidates, including Catherine, the nominee here, kind of noticed that. I mean, the candidates come in when we interview them, they do their homework, they know the strategic plan, they know this, they know that. And boy, pretty much all of them kind of pointed to these test scores. Not so good. Like, what's your general thought about how important test scores are?
Well, I think they're important. And the low test scores, not just because of COVID and all the other reasons why, but in comparison to other comparable schools with comparable family income levels, with comparable background education that parents have and so on, I think they're disappointing. They're not adequate, they're not satisfactory. And I do think you need to drill down on that. I think you need to talk to faculty about what the process is of handing kids off from grade to grade, from school to school. You now have in Conway, K through 2 school, 3 through 5 school. So those are a lot of handoffs. And what you're going to hear from teachers, which you always hear from teachers, is, boy, that last school didn't do a good enough job preparing the kids for me. I have to go back and do this stuff to fix what they didn't teach. I think continuity across the board. You have a new assistant superintendent of schools for curriculum. Can she help create that sense of continuity? not just internally in Conway, but Jackson, Bartlett, down to the SAU 13 schools. There has to be more communication so that the handoff as kids move along through the system is one that's smooth, and that the teacher in third grade knows that the second grade teacher covered the curriculum that needed to be covered, and the teacher in ninth grade knows that the eighth grade curriculum was covered. And I think that's frequently where things really break down. That's a guess, but those are the kind of things I'd explore.
One of the things that she said, you know, and we have a very good career tech program, whether one believes, and Bill Marvel, our columnist, is always critical of that, saying more emphasis on core curriculum, which is fair, certainly. But Catherine, in the interview process, and this is not any state secret, you know, saying that how and this is not anything totally illuminating, but how critical middle school is, and that all the kids have to be really taught the same way until you really get into high school, and then you start going on tracks. And middle school, I mean, you know, you might as well take those 7th and 8th graders and put them on Mars for a couple of years, pretty much.
Well, I always suggested farms. I think they should work on farms for those 2 years. Yeah, every teacher like me who at some point in their lives taught 9th graders thinks, boy, the middle school utterly failed us. Those little junior high kids are little monsters, and when they get to 9th grade, they're utterly unprepared. But continuity did pay off. Gordon Mann, legendary high school math teacher and head of the math department, devoted a great deal of time to going to Bartlett, to the 8th graders in Bartlett, the 8th graders in Tamworth, as well as the 8th graders at was called junior high in Conway, to make sure that that transition was being prepared for, that the kids had the opportunity to study algebra if they had that capacity as 8th graders, that they had the opportunity to be really introduced to geometry, and that if they weren't up to those courses, that their basis in basic math skills, measurement and the like, that they were prepared for the next grade. And he spent a lot of time with those teachers, and it made a difference, right down to 2nd and 3rd grade teachers as well. But that really can make a difference. I want to compliment the Sun, which I didn't do the last time I was here. I'm going to compliment the Sun. My second favorite issue after the April Fool's issue is the one where you print the pictures of all the graduates, and the little blurb underneath about what they're going to do next year. And of course, they were all over the place, as they always are, in terms of kinds of things they're going to pursue and really how ready they are to pursue anything. And that's fine, that's okay. What I think is really encouraging is that year in, year out, kids are able to graduate from Kennett High School and go on to Stanford or Dartmouth or Colby or Middlebury. They have the opportunity to be prepared for the best colleges in the country. And it obviously doesn't apply to 100% of the kids. This isn't Greenwich, Connecticut. But that should be very encouraging for people who are worried about the test scores. Clearly, the capacity to learn what you need to learn in order to be prepared for those elite schools, it's there, along with the vocational programs that are available, the quality of the special education programs, the general prep for kids who are going on to college or not. There's a lot there, and there's a lot of opportunity there. Kids have to take advantage of it. Parents have to motivate kids. Teachers can do some motivation as well. In the end, a lot of it comes from the parents and the kids themselves. There's a lot to work with for our new superintendent to make stuff work
and I think all the candidates said the top kids, and these are my words, basically take care of themselves. I mean, the opportunity's there. I'm not saying that. They're AP classes, but the top kids are going to be the top kids, whether you're here or in Greenwich. This is kind of the way it works.
It's true, but there are schools that simply don't offer the courses and the coursework that adequately prepares kids for success at the best colleges. And Kennett does provide that opportunity. We have faculty at Kennett, and of course all the way through, from kindergarten through 12th grade. But we have the faculty at Kennett that can get you ready to go and be successful at, I'll use Stanford again, because the young lady is going there.
Okay, that's very good. Now, just so you don't get too many cards and letters, we don't call it vocational anymore. It's career tech.
What did I say? Career tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am a little bit old-fashioned that way. And one comment on career tech. Years and years ago, a former Kennett principal Jack Loyne gave me a book, and it was a book about vocational education, which is what it was called then, and it emphasized how things were done in Europe, particularly in Germany, but Finland and elsewhere. And it was really interesting in the degree of integration between the businesses in the communities around high schools and the programs at the high school. You didn't have curriculum, you didn't have vocational programs that were sort of run in isolation from businesses. And I know there's some of that integration goes on, but I'm not sure we take as much advantage of that. And one of the ways to make sure you're driving up basic skills, that reading, writing, and arithmetic preparation is really adequate across the board for all kids, is to have more kids spending time in local businesses and learning not only trade skills, but also applying their general reading, writing, and arithmetic skills to the business world. And that's an interesting area of exploration for a new superintendent and principals as well, is to look at the integration with local businesses, because there's really quite a variety of businesses in town.
Fair enough. That's very well said. So let's summertime in New Hampshire and summertime in Conway. So let's move from education to politics.
Okay.
Okay. So presidential politics. You wrote a column Friday, and you went through different presidents, and I commented on it personally myself, because I'm pretty snarky myself, and said, whoa. And we actually have a letter said the same thing, reflected what I say. The end of it, if I remember it properly, you said it was a choice between democracy or not. Is that what you said?
That's not an unreasonable. I prefer my words to your words.
What did you say?
But I emphasize the fact that democracy isn't about even primarily about electing great presidents year in, year out. Democracy is about being able to get rid of bad presidents or office holders in all areas. That's the difference between an autocracy, a dictatorship, and a democracy, is that when the term in office ends, you can get rid of them. And you can't do that with autocrats. And what Trump did in 2020, and his refusal to depart and to fight tooth and nail against departing despite obviously his loss, that was really, really ugly. The fact that you have two guys who are clearly not competent to be president, you have two guys who are sort of party hacks, two guys who don't have any record of success in their first 4 years in office of any consequence, that's terribly sad. And I have one tiny hope that something could still change that way. But we have a terrible choice, and the question is, do you go with worse or worser? And a threat to democracy is the worst way to go.
So you think, so you think it is people who don't support Trump would say, yes, it's a threat to democracy, and certainly with the false electors and the plan, and asking Vice President Trump not to certify the election.
Pence,
what did I say?
Trump.
Oh, sorry, Vice President.
He was president and vice president. That's how.
Well, that's right. It's in my head. Asking Pence, who, by the way, here in an interview was really, really a special person, I have to admit, personally. But anyway, but there are like a third or 2/3 of the Republicans who still think the election was stolen. How do you account for that?
I don't believe that that's true. I know the polls say that, but a pollster comes to you and says, do you think the election was stolen? And if your candidate was not successful, and that candidate is continuing to rant and rave about how he was ripped off and whine about it and all the rest of it, then you say, sure, yeah, it was stolen. I don't think people really believe that. I think it's wishful thinking. It's a way to take a shot at the Biden presidency. It's an undermining that's been going on by both parties for a long time. But no, I don't believe people seriously. I don't believe Trump, ever seriously believed he won. It was.
That he lost. That he won or lost.
Excuse me. I don't believe he ever seriously believed he lost. I think that's maybe the scariest part. That was completely cold-blooded to say, what can we do to screw this up so that I can stay in power and not be forced out? And that is a threat to democracy.
Yeah. One of my favorite, well, I shouldn't say my favorite, but the first paper I go to in the morning to read is the New York Post. And No, they're headlines. I want to be a
they're
New
good
York.
headlines.
I want to be a New York Post headline writer. But the of course Biden is stumbling around and all that, but he was in Europe, right? And so the headline was, and so he's lining up with 4 or 5 other heads of state, and he drifts off, right? And so the headline is Meander in Chief. And
that's good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. But when you saw the full clip, what he did was he meandered off, so to speak, but he gave thumbs up to a couple of parachuters who were paratroopers who had landed. So he was just kind of going off like that, and of course they don't show that part.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's a little unfair. But he was at his fundraiser with. It seemed like Barack Obama was kind of leading him off the stage. Meanwhile, Trump, who just yesterday said that I passed this mental acuity test or something from his, whoever it was, Randy Johnson. The guy's name is Randy Jackson. So.
We have 2 men who are aged and whose mental faculties are limited. I really don't believe they have the capacity to absorb the volume of information that a president needs to be able to absorb to make good decisions. You can rant and rave, and you can just simply parrot your party line, and both of them are capable of doing that. But if you're really going to be president, you're really going to make the decisions that are going to point our country in the right direction, enable our country to have the greatest possible success. You have to absorb a lot of information. A lot of it's being thrown at you, documents to read, briefings to listen to, and so on. And then you have to process that information, and you have to reach the best possible conclusion you can with all that data. And neither of them are capable of doing that with any consistency or dealing with any kind of a complex problem. So you're talking about presidencies that are largely driven by staff. And the first Trump presidency, you had all those people quit because they just couldn't deal with him losing it all the time. And then you had some incredibly incompetent people around him that got him into some of the problems that he had by doing what he told them to do. With Biden, you have sort of classic Democratic Party liners who are more competent. They're just more knowledgeable people. They're smarter people. But it's creepy because they are absolute ideologues. They believe in the Democratic Party principles. They're going to follow those principles, and they don't care that whether it's right or wrong. This is what we believe in. We're dug in on it, and that's the direction we're going to go. So to a significant degree, you're voting for the people they're going to appoint, because those are the people who are going to be running the government. Neither of these guys are competent to run something as large and complex.
Who do you think is going to win?
Oh, I don't know. I have a dream, though. I have a hope, and that is
split government.
Well, yes, definitely. Whichever one wins, I hope the other party wins the Congress. But my hope would be that this crazy early debate, a debate being held between 2 candidates who are not really their party candidates yet because the conventions haven't been held, that one or both of them will do so badly during the debate that when it comes to the convention, that the conventions will nominate somebody else, that we still have hope of having another option other than these 2 guys. Now that's a low probability kind of situation. They're going to be prepared. They're going to take whatever drugs they need leading up to the debate. Boy, I'd love to look in their medicine cabinets. Absolutely. But I have a slight hope that one of them or both of them would recognize how badly they did during the debate and how embarrassing that is for the country, and to say, hey, we need someone else to
I always say that. I mean, it's sort of like I'm watching a good documentary on Hitler, and the mistake of him, invading Russia. But, if he'd have just not invaded Russia, he would have been in good shape with Western Europe.
He hadn't read a book that said Napoleon did the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But, what got him there, what got him through Western Europe, is that personality is not going to stop at the Russian border. I mean, it's just, Tom Brady is not going to retire. That drive that got him there, Biden, whatever drive it was that got him there, he ain't going to get up. But anyway, I think Biden's going to win, and this is a big secret, but I just think the abortion issue is the real sleeper and up and down the ballot on a lot of local elections, that's powerful, I think.
Well, I've written about the Supreme Court, and I think most of the country recognizes you have a Supreme Court that, as ideological, as partisan as it was in the past, has gone completely off the rails that way. That so many of the votes are straight up party line votes.
You're saying it's always been partisan, but you're saying it's worse now.
Oh yeah, there's no question. I mean, there's no pretense, there's no make-believe that we're trying to be judges and we're actually going to make our judgments based on the law, the precedent, the Constitution. My favorite one is the most recent one, which was Clarence Thomas's decision that said bump stocks are okay. Yeah, machine guns are outlawed, but bump stocks don't make a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. And the numbers that were cited were that a typical machine gun will produce 900, 950 rounds a minute, whereas a bump stock only enables that same piece of equipment to produce 800 bullets a minute, and that he actually wrote in his decision that a really fast trigger finger is roughly the same. I don't know about you, 800 right. times. So they're not even making believe that they're following the law. They're just simply voting along party lines.
What do you think about this? Speaking of Clarence Thomas, what do you think about the Code of Ethics for Supreme Court? I mean, he said, years ago he said, well, I may get off because I don't make enough money. Right. And someone did an analysis and it showed that he's, over the last 20 years or 25 years, he's made $4 million in salary and got $4 million in gifts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's not just gifts. If you go through all of them, the speaking fees in particular, the book fees, because they write books and they get paid for that. So they make good money as Supreme Court justices. David Souter didn't. New Hampshire's
He didn't make good money?
He didn't make good money. He felt everything was a conflict of interest. He was the most fanatically careful guy. In any case, that doesn't exist anymore. All these people are making some good money, generally not like Clarence Thomas, who makes mega money and gets it as a payoff from one particular Republican donor. John Roberts has failed. I think in his heart he would like to have the credibility of the court renewed and not be an embarrassment to the country, but he doesn't know how to do it, and the Congress is in no position to actually impeach these guys, which they probably should be. I mean, look at the people who were Kavanaugh and what's her name,
Barrett.
And Gorsuch and Barrett. I mean, they clearly made an effort to mislead the Senate during their hearings because they said, "Oh, we'll respect precedent," meaning they'd respect Roe versus Wade. And of course, the first time they had the opportunity to vote it down, they reversed it. So they lied to the Senate directly. They misled the Senate as best they could. Is that grounds for them being impeached? I don't know. But first thing I would do, President of the United States, first thing, first day, when those justices are sitting there at my inauguration, I'd hand them each a letter requesting, I can't force it, requesting their resignation. I'd say for the good of the country,
wow.
Bring our country together by stepping down and allowing me to name people. With your advice and suggestion, I'm going to ask you for ideas, but we need nonpartisan people who are not beholding to either political party. And the 6-3 votes that are directly along party lines are an embarrassment to our country. Do something good for our country.
All right, so we only have, believe it or not, 5 minutes left. Let's move to the New Hampshire House. The session just finished, and we're split. The Republican only has a few more members than the Democrats, so it's always been this. But they've been kind of dominating things. But surprisingly, the House, in their final votes, kind of stood up to the far right on a lot of these issues.
No, they didn't. So I know that's been written, and In-Depth New Hampshire covers it, but it's simpler than that. More Democrats, so it's very close, as you said, almost 50-50, right. Slight majority for the Republicans. Republicans didn't show up. They were out, I don't know, riding around on their boats or whatever they were doing, or they were sick, or whatever it was, and the people who showed up for those final votes had a few more Democrats than Republicans. Okay. And the result was that major initiatives on the part of the Republican Party were voted down. The expansion of the education freedom accounts, love that name, that basically paid parents to send their kids to private schools, or even better, homeschool them so they could pocket the
and
cash.
religious schools.
And religious schools. We're spending $50 million on that, taking that money out of public schools. That expansion of that to even more families was voted down, so that it's only 300% of the poverty level. So only half the parents, or 60% of the parents, are eligible, rather than 80% of the parents are eligible. So that got voted down. The funniest one is the cannabis one. Got voted down, and I don't. You got 400 members of the legislature, the House. You probably have 380 different reasons why they voted against it, or why it was able to be voted down. But they couldn't come up with a bill that Sununu would sign off on, and they're making sure that the lobbyist money is going to continue to flow in the next session. The money's going to keep pouring in because the folks who want to sell recreational marijuana are going to keep writing checks to these guys, and they get another term to do it.
Yeah, but I'm a little less cynical than that. I mean, I think that the reason why it failed, or the reason what they said, is that the Senate bill and the Chris Sununu bill wanted to go through the state liquor stores, which is problematic because cannabis is not legal on a federal level, so you get in trouble. And then the House bill was mostly having a little more of a free market type of situation where you would issue licenses to private people to do it. And the knock against the Senate bill was that this is going to be, they're only going to have 15 stores through the state, and it was going to be all Chris Sununu's buddy who's got the money. So I'm cynical, but not cynical in that way. I think most people want cannabis to be legal one way or the other, and it's eventually going to happen.
But why hasn't it? And it's about money.
Yeah,
it's about who is going to get the biggest reward. I view the lobbyist payments to the influential legislatures as being an important part of it. Donations for future Chris Sununu campaigns, whether it's U.S. Senate or whether it's president, he's lining up those dollars, and that's part of the deal as well. So
now, what do you think about the voting restriction? And we only have another minute here, but the voting restriction, because it turns out right now you can go, if you don't have your documentation, you can just vote, and then they'll check you out after, right?
It's not quite that simple. So as a town moderator, right, you sign an affidavit that says, gee, I really am an American citizen, I really do live here, and I don't have all the documentation I need, but it's election day, I moved here yesterday, I want to be able to vote. Why should I take that person's vote away because they're a little bit transient? So they sign a piece of paper, and the piece of paper says, if I'm lying, I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to pay some hefty fine, and I'm going to really be in a lot of trouble. And as a result, there's virtually no problem in New Hampshire. Every year there are 3 or 5. I think one year somebody said there were a dozen cases that had to be investigated. I'm not even sure how many of them were found to be problematic. But it's not a problem.
Right, and the other thing to add to that is that all those affidavits through the whole state, there are only 230. I mean, it wasn't like there were thousands of people.
Right, and of those 230, 220 of them were telling the truth, and 10, might be an interesting question. And usually they're Republican legislators from Lancaster, right? Yeah. That's who does it.
George, we're going to have to wrap it up. This show is going to be on the Sun's platform, Facebook, and hopefully Bill Edmonds at Valley Vision will pick it up. And
Tune in.
We'll see you next month.
I'll be here. Thank you very much.